Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to Quilt Along number 36 on the Free Ocean Quilting Project. This week we're back on the machine and back on the Batik Beauty quilt with another flowing lines variation design. Again, this design will work wonderfully in the sashing of any quilt, and this week we're seeing what this design looks like when you mix it with Paisley. Let's get on the machine and see how it works. Okay, let's get started with the new variation of this flowing line design. If you remember back 2 weeks ago, we learned flowing lines. That's these nice open gaps amid really organic freeform wiggly lines. And then last week we learned Goldilocks, which is basically the same base design but with stippling stitched in those gaps. So this week let's try another variation. Same idea, nice flowing lines, travel stitching within the edges, along the edges of our quilting space, which is this nice wide sashing. And this time we're going to fill those gap areas with the design we learned last month, Paisley. So this design is called Trapped Paisley. I already have a base of several wiggly lines right here, so I'm going to get started with the gap line first. Then travel stitch my way into it and fill it with a smaller scale Paisley, very similar to the smaller scale stippling. Okay, so the area is filled pretty nicely, but I'm kind of right in the middle of this line of stitching. I need to get basically to either side, either edge, in order to travel stitch and do some echoing. I'm going to go ahead and travel all the way up, so that's closest. And travel stitch over and bring up my echo. Now, I don't like forming gap lines from this line simply because I have a hard time seeing back here, but I'm going to try and wing it. I'm going to stitch out and try and kind of estimate my space to hit this line back here and form a nice big wide gap right through this area. Just like that. Okay. And you notice I've got two little spots that I hopped out of the design, right here and right here. So I'm going to travel down and I'm actually going to make those look consistent with this design. Paisley is a really good design to hide mistakes in, and that's the really nice thing about it, is I can come down here and actually fix this mistake and you'll never notice it. So here's how this is going to work. I'm basically going to pretend that that's an echo, a little hop out, and I'm just going to expand on it. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. It's not perfect, but at least it is some way of fixing that little mistake. And some mistakes are bigger than others and worth fixing more than others. It's really just entirely up to you. But I would not pick up my seam ripper to rip that, just little hops out of the out of stitched in the ditch lines. I would not pick up a seam ripper to rip that out. As you can see, this is going to end up being a lot more dense because it's Paisley, and Paisley is generally a more dense design than stippling. So it's just going to be something that you have to kind of keep in mind. Maybe widen these flowing lines in between a little wider, and that will kind of keep the density and keep it from getting too stiff. It's also a good idea to maybe stitch them more often, so I'm going to stitch a couple flowing lines back to back. And now I'm going to travel stitch and come up with another gap line. Now I'm just going to continue and build out this design. Whenever I get into the border areas, I'm going to stitch a wiggly line so that way I have something to work off of, even into the borders. I'm not stitching a different design around these borders. I've decided not to. And just kind of let the design flow, continually working in one direction along your quilt. And so I'm going to just continue to stitch and let you just listen to the sounds the machine's making and the speed changes. When I'm speeding up, of course, the machine gets louder. When I'm slowing down, usually when I'm travel stitching, I'm being a lot more careful to make sure those stitches stay right in the area they're supposed to. Mess up, just go on ahead and start yourself a Paisley. It's no big deal. I messed up right there and hopped out. And that looks pretty consistent. And now it's on the gap. Most mistakes in your quilting can be hidden, and some mistakes are just so minor that you don't even need to bother with them. No one's going to take a microscope to your quilt unless it's a show quilt, so just keep that in mind. probably heard my machine making a lot of loud noises in this spot. That's because there's a lot of seam allowances underneath the quilt coming together all in this spot. It really does help to press your seam allowances always open, so that way those areas are not nearly as dense and difficult to stitch over. Stitching off the edge of the quilt in the batting area right here, just so I can get up here to the top and make a wiggly line up to this corner. And you just want to hold and press the quilt in place so you don't get a pleat, and lift your presser foot, and stitch in close, and that way you get into the back on top of the quilt without creating a pleat. Again, you can vary the width of your echo lines. That's perfectly fine. You can also have echo lines that start skinny and get bigger. It's really entirely up to you. Play with the texture and see what you like the most as you stitch this design. So that is Trapped Paisley. I hope you try this design out on a bed quilt of your own. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you'll get on your machine and give Trapped Paisley a try. Of course, if you're wanting to make a version of the Batik Beauty Quilt to try out all of these different designs on, you can find a free pattern whenever you sign up for the Free Motion Quilting Project newsletter. And you can find the sign up at freemotionproject.com. Also, along at that website, you will find the post that corresponds to this video, also the quilt along. So if you stitch out this design and you want to quilt along and share your photo of your beautiful quilt, you can link up with everyone else. All you have to do is post a photo to Flickr or Facebook or your blog and share it with everyone else. Make sure to ask any questions that you have, post any issues. We're here to help you out and learn free motion quilting. So until next time, let's go quilt.